Coming up today, following last-minute negotiations that stretched well into the night, Korea's rival parties agreed to pass a $334 billion budget bill for next year. President Park Geun-hye is in Prague for a series of meetings with Central and Eastern European leaders. It's hoped her trip will boost Korea's political and economic ties with the up-and-coming region. Plus, the United States says it's sending special forces to kill Islamic State militants and rescue hostages in Iraq and Syria. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 2nd of December. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, Korea's rival political parties have agreed to hold a parliamentary plenary session on this Wednesday to pass a revised budget bill for 2016. For more, our parliamentary correspondent Park Geun-hye joins us from the National Assembly. So, Ji-won, this deal follows overnight negotiations between the floor leaders of the ruling Geunhye Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy.
Well, that's right, Mark. Both parties agreed to put the $334 billion budget bill to a vote during today's full assembly, expected later in the afternoon. Korea's constitution requires the National Assembly to pass the budget bill 30 days before the start of the fiscal year at the latest, and that deadline falls today. However, the rival parties have yet to agree on a budget for the nation's free child care program for toddlers. The opposition says the central government should take the full responsibility for funding, as the program was the president's campaign pledge. But the ruling Geunhye Party says, although the central government can assist in providing funding to a certain level, support for child care services should, in principle, come from provincial education offices. As of now, the matter is still undergoing parliamentary debate.
Yes, OK, Ji-won. And along with the passage of the budget bill, the parties also plan to pass some other pending bills today.
Yes, Mark, the rival parties have agreed to pass 5 key bills, including the Tourism Promotion Act and the International Medical Support Act, backed by the ruling party, as well as the Fair Franchise Practices Act, led by the opposition bloc. In the case of the Anti-Terrorism Act, both parties agreed to pass this during next week's full assembly, but only after more deliberations. However, regarding labor reform-related bills, which is the ruling party and the government have been pushing hard, the parties have agreed to continue discussions with the aim of passing them during the next extraordinary session. And okay, that's it for now. I will have more updates later today. Back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Ji-won. We'll be connecting back with her at 6 p.m. Korea time, when hopefully the budget for next year has been passed. Now, in other news, wrapping up her trip to Paris on Tuesday, President Park Geun-hye is now in the Czech Republic for a string of summits with leaders from Central and Eastern Europe. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports from Prague.
Prague is the last stop in President Park's 7-day tour of Europe, which already took her to Paris for the UN Climate Change Conference. Here, she is set to hold a string of summits with leaders from Central and Eastern Europe. On Wednesday, President Park will meet with her Czech counterpart Miloš Zeman to discuss ways to bolster cooperation in time for the 25th anniversary of their diplomatic ties. She will then attend a meeting of Korean and Czech business leaders and meet with the country's leading lawmakers. President Park will also hold talks with the Czech Prime Minister on Thursday. The real business will be Friday's summit with the Visegrad, a regional economic community of the Czech Republic, Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary, deemed the fastest-growing European Union nations.
There will be in-depth discussions on cooperation in future growth engines such as science, technology, and health and medical treatment, as well as opportunities for Korean companies to participate in state infrastructure projects in the 4 European nations.
It will be President Park's first meetings with the Visegrad. She will follow them up with separate bilateral summits with her Polish, Slovakian, and Hungarian counterparts. President Park's visit to Prague is the last presidential trip of the year and is expected to widen South Korea's summit diplomacy to Central Europe. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News, Prague.
Now, President Park Geun-hye says Korea wants to play a more central role in setting up a secretariat for the memory of the World Register that would provide a fairer system for UNESCO's record. During a speech at UNESCO headquarters in Paris on Tuesday, President Park laid out her plan to expand Korea's level of contribution for the development of a global record system that will be objective and democratic. The Korean government plans to sign an MOU with UNESCO next Wednesday to set up a secretariat in the southwestern city of Gwangju. Now, some analysts say the president's emphasis on the objective and democratic process is part of efforts to stop Japan trying to whitewash its past wrongdoings. Korea is pushing to apply for UNESCO designation for documents related to Korean women who were forced into sexual slavery for the Japanese military before and during World War II. Now, Korea's current account surplus is in the black, yet again, extending its surplus streak to a record 44 months. According to the Bank of Korea, the nation's current account surplus came to $8.96 billion in October. That's down slightly from the previous month, but up more than $200 million from the same month last year. The surplus was largely attributed to falling imports, outpacing a drop in exports, although the gap did narrow. In October, exports fell over 15% on year, while imports slipped almost 17%. Now, despite women taking a more active role in the workforce in Korea, it doesn't seem to be the case in the nation's public sector. According to Market Watcher CEO score, among some 2,500 new employees hired as of the end of September at 30 public institutions, just 490, or less than 20%, were female. That's down 5 percentage points from 3 years ago. 11 public institutions didn't hire any women at all. The glass ceiling also remains pretty much intact when it comes to promotions for female workers. Among 148 executives, only 2, or just over 1%, were women. Now, imports of some agricultural and stock breeding products from Korea's FTA partners have increased sharply this year. Gwon So-ah tells us what they are and why.
Koreans are tucking into more imported pork than ever before. According to recent trade data from countries Korea has free trade agreements with, there has been an overall spike in food and agricultural imports this year. But the most noticeable rise can be seen in pork shipments. In the first 9 months of the year, Korea imported more than 190,000 tons of pork from the EU, 120,000 tons from the US, and a sizable amount from Canada and Chile. That's an on-year jump of more than 43% from the EU and a significant rise from the other countries too. So what's driving the trend? Local demand for pork is on the rise, but with domestic prices relatively high, more consumers are choosing to purchase imported pork products. Also, as the years tick by, tariffs between trade pact partners are being reduced, which is why experts believe domestic pork producers will have to cut their prices to entice consumers away from increasingly cheap pork from overseas.
Pork consumption is expected to increase in Korea. Domestic production will go up as well. But with more cheaper imports coming in, Korea's dependency on local pork will drop even further.
Demand for imported dairy products has increased too, as the average price of cheese has tumbled more than 10% on year. The EU more than doubled its dairy exports to Korea in the January to September period compared to last year, and dairy shipments from Australia went up by a fifth. Milk from these FTA partners is around half of the price of milk produced in Korea. What's more is that milk from New Zealand is even cheaper, and the ink is just drying on Parliament's ratification of Seoul's free trade deal with Wellington. Gwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, when it comes to South Korea's fathers taking leave to look after their newborn kids, there's a stark contrast between, on the one side, the country's policy and the actual leave taken. Korea's paternal leave policy is considered the best among OECD nations, but actual use of it is one of the lowest. According to the OECD's family database, Korea's paid paternity leave is 52.6 weeks for each child. meaning fathers are entitled to over 1 year's leave per child, including some form of payment from their employer. This is about 6 times higher than the OECD average of 9 weeks. However, in 2014, Korean fathers' average actual leave was only 5.2 weeks. Also, just 4.5% of Korea's total parental leave in 2014 was by fathers, showing low use of their entitlement. In Norway, the rate was about 21% and about 26% in Sweden. The United States is stepping up its efforts to defeat the Islamic State group by deploying additional special forces to Iraq and Syria. Washington has been almost exclusively relying on air power until now, but this latest decision shows the Pentagon is coming round to the fact that victory might only be possible with boots on the ground. Connie Kim reports.
U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter has been laying out Washington's plan to smash the Islamic State group by deploying elite Black Ops forces to Iraq and Syria. Speaking at the U.S. House Armed Services Committee in Washington on Tuesday, Carter said a new targeting force would be sent to help Iraqi and Kurdish Peshmerga forces in Iraq. He also said a team has been cleared to take part in raids inside Syria.
We are forming and have the expeditionary targeting force. That's a force that wouldn't be on the ground all the time in Syria. It would go in, conduct raids, and go out.
The deployment signals a seismic shift in the Obama administration's strategy against the militant group. Up until recently, President Obama had ruled out putting boots on the ground. Carter did not give out the specific number of special forces troops to be sent to Iraq, but said it would be larger than the 50 sent to Syria in October. He announced the U.S. would deploy 50 special operation forces to work with anti-ISIS fighters in Syria. Washington's top military officer was also giving testimony before the committee. Marine General Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the U.S. had not contained ISIS. His comments contradict remarks made by President Obama last month when he said the U.S. had contained the extremist group. Adding to concerns, a report by George Washington University on Tuesday identified some 300 U.S.-based ISIS sympathizers. Since early 2014, more than 70 Americans have been charged with supporting the terrorist organization, with a sharp increase in arrests this year. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, urging world action to fight climate change, US President Barack Obama has likened global warming to terrorism. During a news conference on Tuesday, he said climate change is, quote, akin to the problem of terrorism and ISIL, which is his term for ISIS, or the Islamic State militant group. He added that both threats demand sustained efforts from the US. In his opening address to the ongoing UN climate change conference in Paris this week, Obama tied the terrorist attacks in the French capital to climate change, noting that united efforts to combat climate change is a way of showing, quote, rejection of those who would tear down our world. However, Republicans in the US have criticized the president for understating the threat of terrorism. Now, in sports news, the MLB's Minnesota Twins have inked a deal with the Korean slugger Park ByungHo. The Twins announced on Tuesday the signing of the 29-year-old first baseman to a 4-year, $12 million contract with a club option for 2020 worth $6.5 million. A 2-time MVP in the KBO, the power hitter posted impressive numbers for the Seoul-based Nexen Heroes with 53 home runs and a .343 batting average for the 2015 season. Park, when he makes his first major league appearance, will be the 15th ball player from Korea to enter the big leagues. Now, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg has pledged to give away 99% of his Facebook shares to charity. In a letter to their newborn daughter made public on Tuesday via Facebook, Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, pledged their stakes, currently valued at $45 billion. The couple plan to pay out the fortune over their lifetime, starting with $1 billion a year for the next 3 years. The couple said they hope to contribute to the advancement of human potential and promotion of equality by supporting developments in health, education and technology.
Facebook, 100%.
Now, Arirang TV, the station you're watching right now, is continuing to broaden its exchanges with European broadcasters to better promote Korea throughout the continent. The CEO and president of Arirang TV, Park ByungHo, met with Timo Pesonen, the Director General in DG Communication of the European Commission in Brussels on Tuesday, to present cooperative initiatives. During the meeting, the two sides reached a tentative agreement for media support, including the sharing of content. Earlier this week, on Monday, Korea's only public English channel established a cooperative relationship with French broadcasting station France 24 to help promote diplomatic ties between Korea and France. Well, that's all we have for now. Do have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you as always for watching. For more news stories, please check out our website. It can be found by going to arirang.com/news. Goodbye.